Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little different. Rather than shooting information in a quick shot style like in my 10 fun fast facts about Genshin, I'm going to sit down and talk about a theory I've been exploring for the past couple of days and proposing a solution to a question that is yet to be answered. This theory being centered around my favorite character in the entirety of Genshin Impact, Xinyan, and a small quirk many like about her, me included. Of course, I will try to be brief in order to not waste any of you guys' time. But before we begin, I'd just like to preface and say this is nothing but a theory video, and I have no insider knowledge in the design of Xinyan, nor any insights on the topics I will be discussing. I'm not well versed in these topics, and will just be presenting the surface level information I was able to gather, while giving you guys my thoughts along the way and seeing if I can spark a discussion amongst the fans. That being said, please leave a comment if you wish to debunk any information I got wrong, or if you wish to give any information I didn't mention. This will greatly aid us in coming even closer to a solid answer. Also, be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment if you wish for me to create a video that's about another topic. But without further delay, let us begin my video on Xinyan's Renetophobia. So, what is Renetophobia? Of course, it's the irrational fear of frogs, the name originating from Renidae, the most common family of frogs with the widest distribution in population. In one of Xinyan's idle animations, we can see her twitch and flinch at the mere sound of a frog, dancing around in a panic, trying to discern the location of the amphibian before calming herself by patting her chest and returning to her default stance. As adorable as this little animation is, there is not even a single line of text or dialogue in the game that we can find that gives us the player any sizable clue on why Xinyan fears them so much and would react in such an uncharacteristically girlish way. Even the official wiki pages for our characters don't mention it once. That leaves us with not much of a choice, but to close our favorite game in order to outsource our information from the World Wide Web, which, to no one's surprise, revealed to me a series of possible answers to our query. I will be introducing each of my findings one by one and make them as digestible as possible, to understand how I could explain Xinyan's alarm for such a small creature. Albeit some of these findings aren't as plausible as the others, and many of them don't make much sense upon further investigation, but I digress, and will let you guys form your own opinions on them. Firstly, the very boring and objective lens we'll be looking through for a mere moment. A phobia can be caused by a traumatic event that took place in a person's formative years, that remains and festers well into their adulthood, giving the inflicted little to no plausible explanation as to how they attained that emotion in the first place, if questioned by a peer. As an example, let's say a small baby Xinyan is playing near a body of water, when suddenly she comes across a frog. Being the curious child she is, decides to take a closer look. The frog, being intimidated by a much larger creature, jumps at her face and startles her, leaving her running away in a childlike distress. This type of event can produce an irrational fear within a person's psyche, especially if we had no physical confirmation that whatever event had just transpired wasn't an actual threat to our well-being. Now, the reason I say this theory is boring is that it simply makes too much sense, and leaves little to no room for discussion. I mean, what is there to discuss? She got spooked, and hasn't liked them since. It isn't a flawed explanation in the slightest. However, it does leave a sort of emptiness to this little adventure, doesn't it? And makes it seem like while other characters have poses that represent a part of their story, we just have, well, something irrational. That really leaves us pretty dissatisfied. Which leads me into the fun part of the video, where we will actually be exploring the cultural significance of frogs and any folklore they are mentioned in, particularly from those of Chinese origin, as Xinyan hails from Liyue, Genshin's interpretation of China. The first fragment of folklore comes in the form of a proverb. The saying describes a frog down a well, which is in reference to a Han fable that describes a frog being content in his dark little well before being revealed the wonders of the great sea outside of his narrow view. Nowadays, the saying describes a person who follows one headstrong way of doing things, and, because of that, are as blind as a frog down a well. Sound familiar to anyone? Yes, Xinyan has very strong ideals, there's no doubt about it, but it is ultimately very narrow vision and could lead her into trouble down the line, which it already has. So, her fear of frogs could be in reference to this old literature as a representation of her fear or stubbornness of trying a new approach to the way she sees life. But let's dive a little further than that, into the oddball selections of this video. First, look at this artifact. It depicts a three-legged frog with a coin in its mouth. What does it mean, you may be asking? Well, it represents wealth and prosperity to the Chinese people, and it can be seen in storefronts or other areas of business. Origins of the statue pertains to a myth of a politician who had a three-legged frog as a pet, that apparently knew the secrets to immortality, that the frog would share with the man in return for the man's companionship. But whenever the frog would run off and hide in a well, the man would lure the frog back out by dangling some coins in the well for the frog to eat. This story leads me to connect the fact that, in a purely symbolic form, Xinyan's fear of frogs could originate from the fact that she doesn't have any intention to be very wealthy, or maybe she has a fear that the drive for materialistic gain can warp her perception of reality. She follows her passion into rock and roll for the spiritual benefit, not for any financial gain. Although, I feel like this connection is a stretch. and actually requires a bit of inference in order to make work. Not to mention, the frog doesn't necessarily represent enormous wealth, but rather just overall good fortune when it comes to money. And the next copium option is the practice of frogs in Chinese medicine. It is believed that frogs secrete certain liquids from their bodies that can be used as a remedy for a multitude of health complications, particularly the heart, which is the same body part that Xinyan quells under idol animation. Let's go, we did it! No, yeah, even I find this one very funny, as this is just simply way too far-fetched to be a reason for this to be the animation's intention. Patting yourself on the chest is a very common way for many people to recollect themselves after being exposed to such a sudden scare, but we will keep this in the video simply because I think it's funny! Finally, we come across the most compelling reference that I could find, and what I believe to be the reference Hoyoverse intended for this mysterious idol animation. This excerpt will be a little long, but I will try to get through it as quick as possible. The pious people who reside in the Han River region in Hubei, China, live in fear of the almighty frog god, who is worshipped at a frog-filled temple specifically dedicated to him. The frog god possesses divine powers and can communicate with others in their dreams. Shui Kunsheng, a young bachelor, is selected by the frog god to be his daughter's future spouse. The Shui family disregards this, and sometime later arranged for Kunsheng to take the Jiang family's daughter as his wife. The frog god is infuriated, and the Jiang family, fearful of retribution, cancel the wedding plans. After making an offering to the frog god temple, Shui is summoned to meet the frog god, who takes on the form of an old man. At that point, he is introduced to his daughter, Xinyan, a frog spirit in the form of a beautiful girl who Shui instantly falls in love with. Shui's parents disapprove of the arrangement initially, but there is no conflict on the day of marriage. Shui's parents-in-laws occasionally visit the household afterwards, and their attire is indicative of what prosperity the Shui family is to reap: red for happy events, and white for greater wealth. Many of Xianyang's frog's relatives in their original form now frequent the Shui residence too. Peace enjoyed in the family fizzles out one day, however, when Shui, in a bout of bad temper, kills a handful of frogs and criticizes the frog god for imposing a reign of terror on the Hubei people. Xinyan chastises her husband for being insensitive and ungrateful, then storms off. She returns after Shui atones for his mistakes, but soon afterwards leaves again, this time after being chased away by Shui, who regards Xinyan as an unfilial wife. He protests this to the frog god and threatens to commit arson to his temple. The frog god, in return, offers to build a house for Shui, and Xinyan reunites with him. Yet, Shui Kunsheng succeeds at driving his wife away for the third time after using snakes, traditional predators of frogs, to play a prank on her. This time, she does not return, despite the Shui family's best efforts at winning her back. A year goes by, and Shui receives information that Xinyan is being engaged to the Yuan family. He is grief-stricken and becomes emaciated, until he realizes Xinyan is standing by his side. She explained that she had already rejected Yuan's dowry and gifts and had long yearned to be back with him, against the wishes of her father, the frog god. They reflect on their personal growth during the course of their marriage, and Xinyan reaffirms her wedding vows to Shui. The villagers start to venerate Shui. Xinyan gives birth to twin sons, and the human-amphibious lineage thrives. This is verbatim the plot synopsis of the Chinese story of the frog god that I found on Wikipedia. I'm sure some of you already picked up on it, but I'll run it through a text-to-speech to let you hear the reference, as I'm pretty sure I butchered the name.
Xinyan, 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 Xinyan.
Did you catch that? Now, don't those two names sound very, very similar? But let's put all the pieces together now. In the story, the townsfolk all live by the Han River, which I will connect to the Liyue Harbor, which resides next to a large body of water. The people in the story fear the frog god, which we can clearly see Xinyan feels the same, albeit to a much smaller scale. When Shui's parents-in-laws would come to visit, they would wear red or white clothing, the two same colors used in the color palette for Xinyan's clothes. In the part of the story where Shui loses his temper with Xinyan, he calls her unfilial, which means not observing the obligations of a child to their parent, which in Xinyan's story, we find out she was not anything her parents wanted of her, whether it be her appearance or the way she carried herself. The final connection being that Shui threatens the frog god by means of arson, which, as many of you know, involves fire, the same element in which Xinyan's vision takes the form of. With all this reasoning, I will conclude my statement. Xinyan's idol animation is in fact a reference to this old Chinese short story of the frog god. There are flaws to this theory of mine, of course. The most glaring one being the names of the two characters don't translate into words that have any correlation whatsoever. Xinyan's name having the characters for pungent and flame, while Xinyan's name has the characters for ten and mother. Also, the moral of the frog god story doesn't pertain to Xinyan at all neither. She has yet to be in a relationship, let alone getting engaged to anyone, and of course, I don't think Xinyan has any twin sons? So this theory of mine isn't without any opposition. In fact, it probably can be debunked by many, which I very much encourage. But in my own opinion, I am fully convinced that this is the most compelling reason I could find as to why Hoyoverse would make Xinyan afraid of frogs, of all things. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, leave a comment if you wish to weigh in on this theory, subscribe if you wish to see more content, and most importantly, have a beautiful day.